I did.
And good afternoon, producer Susan. You know what today is?
It's the first day of spring, although it was snowing this morning.
Yes, it's the summer solstice. We have equal amount of daylight and nighttime, and starting tomorrow, you have a few more minutes of daytime than nighttime. So anyway, so which means that if today's the summer solstice, that means we're recording this today on March 19th, and it is officially the first day of spring. It's also known as the vernal equinox. So spring is here, and I took my snowblower off my garden tractor yesterday and put the mower deck on. So I'm all set
But
for
you're the reason why it snowed.
I know. All my fault. All my fault. All right. Um, by the way, in a couple more weeks, we're going to have a an eclipse out in your neck of the woods.
Yeah,
You gonna
I
go
am
west?
in so where I am, I'm in 96% totality, but all of my friends are all road tripping up to Erie, Pennsylvania, which will be in 100% totality.
By the way, if you know anybody who's a welder, has a welding masks make great. Too bad I wasn't going to see you in the next month or so. You could take one of my welding. Maybe you got a boyfriend or anybody you know with a welding mask?
I don't know if he's got a welding mask or not.
But welding masks are great for looking at the sun. Anyway, so see if you know anybody with a, or maybe put a thing out on your Facebook page that anybody has a welding mask they can borrow, or even welding goggles will work too. Anyway, our quote of the week is from author John Quinton on how politicians react when they finally start to see some light at the end of the tunnel. I may have done this one a couple of years ago, but it's a great quote, and it's really appropriate for what's going on these days. Remember last month they had the Super Bowl parade in Kansas City, and 12 people were shot. One person died. They found 12 different guns scattered around.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
well, uh, Sunday they had, and that was Kansas City, Missouri. And most people don't know this, but Kansas City actually straddles the river. And on the east side, you got Kansas City, Missouri, and the west side, you got Kansas City, Kansas. Well, this Sunday, they had the St. Patrick's Day parade in Kansas City, Kansas, and it was hundreds of thousands of people packed shoulder to shoulder. And we'll tell you how many people got shot in Kansas City, Kansas on Sunday. And then we'll do a compare and contrast. Um, we'll give another example. You know, the country's 34 trillion in debt. We're going to have a $1.6 trillion deficit. Heard on the news this morning another great example of a non-essential multi-million dollar expenditure by the federal government that I believe it's a perfect example of the type of spending that needs to end until we can someday achieve a balanced budget. You know, there's things that we have to do and there's things that are nice to do. And unfortunately, I think we need to go on austerity and stop doing the nice to do. And what I'm going to tell you about is one of those nice to do things.
Mhm.
I know we've talked about this in the past. We've talked about the California bullet train saga, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, we have an update to the California bullet train saga. So let me ask you this. Every time we've done this, it's been more money and a longer completion date. Do you think this update is going to be less money and a quicker completion date?
I'm gonna guess it's more money and longer completion date.
You guess right. All right. And we're going to tell you where and why some Taco Bell restaurants are closing their dining rooms and converting to drive-through only. Um, I don't know if you had heard about the high school, the female high school student that's in a coma and critical condition. She had her head smashed into the
I
concrete.
did. That's horrible.
And there's a op-ed piece. You know, op-ed is editorial opinion piece from a guy that wrote, I think, a great piece that explained why he believes stuff like that is more and more common. So I'll just read you an excerpt from his opinion piece. And kind of going hand in hand with that, I've got a clip here of a bunch of teachers explaining what it's like these days, trying to teach unteachable kids and why they believe those kids have become unteachable. And finally, our taxpayer relief shot comes to us from St. Paul, Minnesota, where 4 teenage thugs break into a guy's house and only 3 of them leave alive. Where have we, and of course, as you can always guess, the other 3 just ran and left their dead buddy behind. So, all right, here we go. Author John Quinton, who said, politicians are people who, when they start to see the light at the end of the tunnel, they go out and buy more tunnel. Can you relate to that at all?
Oh, yeah.
Politicians actually want they want issues, because if they solve a problem, then they won't have anything to campaign about. I mean, and I shake my head. I see this all the time, whether it be border security or food stamps or whatever it is. They really don't want to solve these things because abortion, because they really need these issues. So they enjoy the fight. The fight gives them something to talk about in their campaign. So again, John Quinton, politicians are people who, when they start to see light at the end of the tunnel, go out and buy more tunnel. And unfortunately, when they buy that tunnel, they're buying it with your tax dollars.
Yeah.
So I mentioned the St. Patrick's Day parade in Kansas City, Kansas on Sunday. Several 100,000 people shoulder to shoulder. You want to guess how many people got shot?
Uh, I don't think that I heard of anybody getting shot on the news.
Well, that's because nobody did. So let me ask you a question. Why did you have one parade where 12 different people were firing guns at each other? 12 people got shot, one people got killed. Kansas City, Kansas, hundreds of thousands of people shoulder to shoulder, not a single person fired a single shot. Why do you think that is?
Uh, it was my understanding that the original, the Super Bowl parade, that was a targeted, almost a domestic dispute.
Well, somebody in one group looked or said something to the other group, and then that guy got to, well, you dissed me, whatever it is, you disrespected me, and therefore I'm gonna shoot you.
I guess nobody disrespected somebody else at the Kansas City, Kansas parade on St. Patrick's Day.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with demographics. But I hate to point this out, but every single person who was arrested for shooting in the Super Bowl parade was African American. Every single suspect. Now, unfortunately, not all the victims. Some of the victims were innocent bystanders. But of the 12 people arrested, every single one was an African American. And maybe that's just the culture. And the reason I'm bringing this up about culture, when we talk about this high school girl that's in critical condition in a coma, the culture has a lot to do with it. So I just point that out. You had two parades a month apart. In one, there were guns everywhere, people shooting everywhere for no real serious reason. It's just, you insulted me, you disrespected me, therefore I'm going to pull out my gun and shoot you. All right. So you want to move on to spending money that doesn't need to be spent?
Yeah, I feel like the government's really good at that.
Well, let me ask you a question. If you were deeply in debt, and let's say that you owed 5 times more than your annual salary, that's how deep in debt you were. So I'm going to make up a number. Let's say you made $70,000 a year and you owed $350,000. Wouldn't you put yourself on an austerity button and only spend things that are absolutely essential?
Yeah, absolutely. Food, electric.
Food, electric, pay the rent, pay the power bill.
Mhm.
On the news this morning, the mayor of New York City was bragging that they just got a $77 million grant to buy 180 new electric school buses. And by the way, in case you're bad at math, if you divide 77 million by 180, you want to guess what that works out to per bus?
I can't do the math in my head because I got a dog climbing on me.
$480,000 per bus. You know what a regular diesel-powered school bus costs?
I don't know.
150,000. So they're going to buy 180 new electric school buses that cost 3 times as much each as a diesel powered bus, and they're doing it with.
Didn't we talk about the electric buses several shows ago about how they are not a good investment with respect to the cold and the.
Right. In fact, one school district was dumping them because of the high repair costs, and they couldn't keep charge.
So they're not an economic choice, a good economic choice.
But now, don't get me wrong. This is a nice to do thing. Okay. Okay. Nice.
You got extra money.
But if we had extra money, but this is not essential. It is not, life would go on in New York City if they didn't have those 180 new electric school buses. Nobody's life would change for the worse. In fact, they could probably get more school buses and a better reliability. And it's not just New York City. The point is, this is a pot of money. And every major city in the country is going to be doing exactly what New York City. They're going to be putting in a grant application. And so New York City is just a microcosm. This is just an example of the things the federal government needs to stop doing. We don't have, because that's 70, every penny of that $77 million that the federal government is giving to New York City and LA and Minneapolis and Dallas and Denver is borrowed dollars. We don't need to be borrowing dollars so that cities can buy electric school buses. I mean, what's the word I'm looking for? It's unconscionable and irresponsible to be borrowing money to fund projects like that. If we had a budget surplus, I'd say great. But I just think this is, it's fiscally irresponsible. I don't know if you have an opinion, but I'm
Yeah, I
shaking.
mean, and even if you had extra money to spend, that say you had a surplus of money, are there other things that you could be investing in? I mean, we're always hearing about schools cutting different programs like music programs and physical
Exactly.
education
Yes.
programs and after school programs. So are there other more advantageous things that we could be investing that surplus money into?
Fantastic point. A great. So what else could the city of New York have done with that $77 million besides
Mhm.
buy 180 electric school? And by the way, you know what it costs to replace the battery on a standard electric vehicle after
Like $30,000.
20 to 30,000? What do you think it's
Yeah,
going to cost to replace the battery on a
I'm
school
gonna say
bus?
to at least twice that, probably 60.
I'm going to say probably closer to 100. But anyway, but the point is, what are they going to do in 5 years when all those 180 buses need new batteries?
Yeah.
All right. All right. You want to move on to more government waste
Yeah.
on a
What
grander
else are we
scale?
wasting?
Well, we've talked about the California bullet train saga. So
Yeah.
let me take you back to the beginning. At the very beginning, the promises made about the bullet train, and this was in 2008. The promises was it would cover the 350 miles from LA to San Francisco in just under 3 hours, be constructed at a cost of $33 billion and be completed by 2020. Is it 2020 yet?
It's 4 years past 2020.
Oh, okay. So where are we now? 4 years after 2020, no trains are running. And the state of California is now asking for, and this is an increase since the last time we did this story. They now want an extra 100 billion. And you want to guess what the new estimated completion time is?
2030.
Not even close. Sometime, quote, in the next century. The
In the
next
next 70
century.
years.
The next century. Okay. So by the way, and
Wow.
if you think 100 billion is going to get this thing done, I mean, if you add the 100, even if that 100 billion was added to the 33 billion, that'd be 133. That's more than 4 times the original cost. Now, so fast forward to today, 2024. No trains are running. The new target completion date is sometimes after the year 2100. The projected route has grown to more than 500 miles because, by the way, every politician in the state says, "Oh no, you need to make it curve out and go to my town and this town and that next town." And that 133 billion, assuming they don't need more money, I'm sure they will, but even if they could bring it in, that works out to $266 million per mile in construction cost and does not include the operating cost or the maintenance cost or the interest expense in that money. And since the bulk of that money is being borrowed, those bonds include both the California state and US Treasury bonds. So what would the annual operating expense for a 500-mile rail route be? Well, if we take the data from Amtrak that spends $143,000 per route mile per year to operate and maintain their rail system, and that comes from $3 billion a year for 21,000 route miles. If you apply that same Amtrak figure to the 500 route miles for the proposed bullet train, that would yield you an operating cost of 71.5 million per year in operating costs. But wait, there's more. At just 3%, what is the annual interest cost on 133 billion in borrowed money? You want to take a guess?
3%. I can't do the math, but I feel like it's 300,000 or is it 3 million?
$4 billion.
Oh my gosh.
That's at 3%. 4 billion. The interest on 3% of 133 billion is 4 billion. So if you add the 4 billion to the 71 million, you come up with, 4.06 billion per year. So let me tell you what that 4.06 billion, again, 4.06 billion is combined maintenance and interest expense. So if you combine those two numbers, and I realize this is not a lot of math, but I'll just tell you, if you assumed 1,000 passengers per day, 500 going each way, times 7 days a week, that'd be 365,000 passengers per year, blah, 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 blah. That would work out to $11,128 per passenger. Now, you say, well, maybe $1,000 per low is $1,000 a day is too low. Okay, you want to double it to 2,000? Well, that's still $5,564 per passenger. And you say, well, Joe, that's really still. I think it's going to be triple that. I think it's going to do 3,000 passengers a day, 1,500 going LA to San Francisco and 1,500 San Francisco to LA. Okay, great. 3,000 passengers a day. Well, you divide 4.06 billion by 3,000, it works out to $3,710 per passenger. Now, you know what the projected by the way, the projected one-way ticket price when they first got this project going, you know what they said the ticket price was going to be?
How much?
$86. But their
So-
cost is going to be $3,700 at 3,000 passengers today. Now, what's the current? You want to take a guess what the current airfare LA to San Francisco is?
It's between $50 to $100 for a flight shuttle.
That's one way because you can buy a ticket on.
Okay, so round trip would be 100 to
150 bucks round trip.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And
150.
you can drive that, by the way, in only 6 hours. You
Right.
could rent a car for $50 and drive there in 6 hours.
So when you look at all these ridiculous costs, and by the way, and with all these stops it's going to make, because again, they're swinging out through Barstow and Fresno and all these other towns. So yeah, you're never going to make the 145 miles an hour, because if you're stopping every 20 miles at every little podunk town, it just destroys that high speed. So, and I'm dead serious. It would be far cheaper for the state of California to simply buy anybody who wants to go between LA and San Francisco to simply buy them a free airplane ticket.
Yeah.
They would save billions and billions and billions of dollars a year just by buying everybody a free ride. So there's another great example. And by the way, and the reason I bring this up is things the federal government shouldn't be funding. 85% of that 133 billion is going to be federal tax dollars or borrowed federal money. So again, this is another nice to do project. Actually, it's not even nice to do. It's a horrible project. But even if it made sense, it's one of those things that we can't afford to be doing. It's just absolutely ridiculous.
And it's an hour flight.
It's an hour flight. Yeah. Do you want to spend 3.5 hours on a train when you can do it in an hour?
Absolutely not. No.
Okay.
I think even when you take into account, having to go through security and stuff, and if they're going to do this, trains or that type of train would be used for like the frequent commuter, the frequent traveler. If they have some special way to, get the commuters through the airport faster, because you're not checking luggage and.
Oh, and let's use this as a yardstick. Everybody talks about, well, we need a national high-speed rail network. So I took these numbers and I applied them for a high-speed rail, New York to LA, right? It's 2,400 miles. And assuming you only had 5 or 6 stops, so let's say Chicago, Omaha, Denver, Las Vegas, it would be $680 billion, which is as much as we spend on the US military. And at 120 miles an hour, a 20-hour trip. Would you spend 20 hours a train to go from New York to LA?
No, because I can get on a plane and be there in 4 hours.
Exactly.
For probably a couple $100. Right.
So I think the California bullet train saga is a perfect argument as to why we should not even try to do a national high-speed rail network. It just makes no sense.
I mean, the government, honestly, because I'm looking, you've got Frontier and United and Delta, all the big names, and they're all running Airbuses that hold approximately 200 people. The government themselves could get their own airplane and run 200 people back and forth all day.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, it makes no economic sense. And again, we're not in a financial position to be spending money on non-essential projects. And I view things like electric school buses for cities. It's not just New York, it's cities like New York, because every other big city is going to be asking for that same amount.
Yeah.
Bullet trains between LA and San Francisco, national high-speed rail. These are nice to do things. All right.
Yeah, and you look at cities like, so the Northeast Corridor, Boston to New York to Philly to DC, those trains have been in existence for hundreds of years, at least 100
And
years.
they make sense, by the way, because
Yeah,
they're
and
short
you have a
routes.
lot of commuters.
Right. You can do Philadelphia to New York City in an hour and 10 minutes.
Mhm.
You can't even drive to the airport and clear security. So that makes sense. Philly to Washington, DC, hour and 15 minutes. Those make great sense. Those trains are packed. I've ridden them.
Yeah.
But that's
Yeah, the
all.
whole Northeast Corridor, like I said, Boston to New
Yep.
York to Philly to
Washington,
DC.
New York, Philly, Washington. That makes great
Yeah.
sense. But
And
cross
again, that
country.
that that train line literally has been in existence for 100 years.
Yep. And it doesn't have to be high speed. You
Mhm.
make great time. Well, the Excella, if you've never had a chance, the Excella is a great line. It's Amtrak Excella, which is kind of their high-speed one between Washington and Boston. All right, you want to move on to Taco Bell?
Yeah,
When was the
someplace
last time
I've
you ate
not
that?
eaten.
When was the last time
Um, Probably when I was in college.
Okay. Do you have any Taco Bells at Penn State?
We do have a couple, and they're not even downtown by the university. They're what is considered to be off campus. So
Okay.
like several miles off campus. There's
Okay.
not one downtown, I don't think.
Well, now most Taco Bells are franchises, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So if you were a franchisee, what would you do if you operated a chain of Taco Bells in Oakland, California, and you could no longer guarantee the safety of your customers or employees due to rampant crime in the area? What would you do if you were the franchisee?
I'd probably close down.
Well, they halfway step. What this one franchise operator has done, instead of just closing it and giving up his investment, he has closed the dining rooms and gone cashless. It's 100% drive-in and 100% credit card or debit card or Venmo. Because there was too much crime, people getting beat up, shot, held up. There were robberies at the counter. People were coming in and robbing the cashiers. So he said, "All right, we can no longer have people coming into the restaurant because they're shooting our other customers, they're robbing our other customers, they're robbing our cashiers, they're threatening the safety of our employees." So they've gone drive up only and no cash. So if you pull up to the window, I mean, big sign, you know, credit card or debit card, Venmo only, no cash. So that's what
I'll
they're
tell you all of the eateries on campus, and this is just not at the main campus, but all the campuses across the state, we are cashless everywhere. And it's not for safety because this is a safe, we're called Happy Valley for a reason.
right.
It's for accounting and just ease of use, and it cuts down on accounting, and we're
Yep.
cashless everywhere.
Yep. That's what. So I wish this
And
guy.
it also though speaks to the demographics too, because you're talking about 18 to 22-year-olds who are used to paying with their phones and their apps, and
Yep.
don't carry cash on them.
Exactly. So, well, I wish this guy luck. Otherwise he's going to lose his investment. But that's what it's come to in Oakland, California. No more dining in. All right. How much time we got? Are you there?
We got about 10 minutes.
All right. So I'm going to move on to St. Louis, where this a few days ago in St. Louis, a young white female student was the victim of a savage beating by a black female
It was
student.
horrible. I watched the video and it was
Right.
absolutely horrible to watch.
And the other female student had this girl and she was beating the back of her head into the concrete, not once, repeatedly, over and over and over. And people were just filming it. Now, so this author, I believe he's a pastor, by the way, he wrote this opinion piece, and he talks about, why this one student felt it was okay to be doing this to another human being. And here's a quote from his op-ed piece. And he calls it victimhood. He said, "Victimhood produces rage and animus. It is a cancer of the mind. Modern American culture preaches and rewards the victimhood mentality. It's a lucrative and effective tool to seize power. It is antithetical to the Judeo-Christian teachings that most of us were brought up with when we were growing up. We no longer teach that as a society. Instead, we teach victimhood and grievance. Our young people are more callous and savage than previous generations because we've convinced them that they're all victims of sexism, racism, homophobia, Islamophobia, fat shaming, transphobia, poverty, pronoun injustice, you name it, etc. They believe that they're all owed a debt. Unpaid debts foment anger. And the author goes on to say, I've been poor. My father and I shared a 400 square foot, one-bedroom apartment in the hood in 1984. While I was captain of my high school football team, I slept on a couch and ate a lot of canned tuna and fast food. I was never angry. In fact, I was happy. I didn't dwell much on our situation because I didn't feel I was a victim. I had two parents who cared about me, and I had always had a belief that things would get better. What do you think of his opinion and
Yeah,
perspective?
I mean, I think situations like that, people, it it makes you appreciate when you do have extra. It's a level of, humility of, you know,
Right. But
it
I
make it
think
makes you tough. I mean, I don't know, maybe it's a generational thing too, but
yeah. Well, this
having
guy's name,
chores to do and,
yeah. Well, you can find this guy on Twitter. His name is Jason Whitlock, Whitlock. But I think here's the he says instead of teaching Judeo-Christian values, and here's the key. He said instead we teach victimhood and grievance. Our young people are more callous and savage than previous generations because we've convinced them that they're all victims. So again, if you think you're a victim, you have rage, you're angry, and you're going to act out. And I think this kind of gets back to the Super Bowl parade shootings. Everybody's hair trigger. They're angry. They're looking to get even with somebody. They feel they've been uh, the victim of something, and their anger. Unpaid, and again, he said they all believe they're owed a debt, and unpaid debts foment anger. So
And I don't know what the whole fight had, what caused to spark the whole fight, but the girls got her head bashed into the concrete, and then the other girl went on to go, fight other people in the crowd.
yeah, and again,
So I don't know what it was all about, but there was a lot of people fighting in that situation. Meanwhile, the poor girls passed out on the concrete.
yeah. Well, look at it this way: she was one angry bitch, right?
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to play this clip and these are different teachers. This is on Twitter, and I'm not going to have time to do the whole thing in 6 minutes. But these are a bunch of teachers talking about uh, why the frustrations they have trying to teach unteachable kids, and this is all different teachers.
Gen Z teachers are talking about the poor behavior of Gen Alpha students, and some of y'all are finally starting to believe us when it comes to how much we've missed the mark on raising these kids right. Because I have gray in my hair and I'm 36 years old, people tend to tune me out as soon as I open my mouth when I start talking about these issues we're seeing in the classroom with our kids these days. So before I go on, why don't we review some of the evidence from some of the other creators on this app who might be a little bit more of a relatable age.
This is my folder of crying teachers, and they are confused and frightened by the behavior of Gen Alpha. They're saying Gen Alpha is defiant, aggressive, disrespectful, and rude.
Having to teach and work with you guys as children has been the most traumatic experience of my life. They don't respect any authority. You ask them, can you stand in your designated spot? They're telling you no and shut up.
And by the way, that woman speaking now, she's a young black teacher. That's who's speaking now.
They're throwing things at each other. They're throwing things at other people, other classmates. You say, can everybody sit in their spot? I don't want to. I'm not doing that. You don't get to tell me what to do. You're not my mom.
Like, I'm not even trying to be funny, but these kids are, I'm gonna just say this. I teach 7th grade, they are still performing on the 4th grade level.
I'm a middle school teacher. I'm also 22 years old. And I will tell you, by far, we are doomed. Like, these kids do not care. Like, I have kids, all they want to do all day long is get high. Like,
I need to ask millennials, why are your kids so awful? And more importantly, why do you think it's so funny? Your kids cannot read. They cannot write. They are ill-mannered.
I've been trying to sound the alarm about Gen Alpha students and their poor behavior in their classrooms, as well as their literacy problems, since May of last year. But because of my age and how I look, every time I make a video about these topics, I'll get people that have never worked with kids or have never spent a day in the classroom as an educator give me lines like, well, you're just old and jaded. If you don't like it and you can't handle it, quit and find another job. Kids have always been like this. Nothing's new in 2023. And then we've got the droves of people that are trying to blame it on COVID and trying to blame it on the lockdown, us not having any sympathy or empathy for students with special needs, even though I never talk about those types of students. And I'm always talking about general population students and the fact that this is an overarching problem with every single kid.
I don't have time. I might save this and play the rest of it
Yeah.
next week, but what do you think
And
of
I
it?
really feel bad for these teachers today because their hands are tied on so many different levels. They're tied by the school board with curriculum, and they're not allowed to discipline the children any longer. You know, they're having to do IEPs for every single child.
Right.
I feel bad for teachers
Right.
today.
And I don't know if you could tell by the vocal inflection, but probably half those teachers were African-American teachers talking about their students. I don't know if you could pick up on that from their vocal inflections.
Yeah, and there's a couple of teachers I follow on TikTok that
Okay.
are just, they hit the nail right on the head.
Okay. All right. We're probably running out of time, aren't we?
Yep, we have about 5 minutes left.
All right, we're going to jump in right. We don't even do the, well, we got time for the lead in from our favorite sheriff in Santa Rosa County.
Somebody's breaking in your house, you're more than welcome to shoot them in Santa Rosa County. We prefer that you do, actually. Hopefully you'll save the taxpayers money.
All right, so this one comes to us from St. Paul, Minnesota.
Are behind bars in connection with a robbery that left another teenager dead.
Investigators say the 4 teens were attempting to rob a couple in Shadow Falls Park along Summit Avenue in St. Paul. Police say the man being robbed pulled a gun and fired, killing 16-year-old Levant Broadbent. Reg Chapman spoke with police and the family of the 16-year-old shooting victim. He joins us now from the scene with more on the investigation. Hi, Reg.
Hey, Amelia, there is a heavy police presence today right here in Shadow Falls Park, and it's not only because of the robbery and shooting that took place here Friday night. Last night, during a vigil for one of the shooting victims, more shots were fired. Right now, police have this area on lockdown until they get to the bottom of what happened to cause a teenager to lose his life. Police describe the incident as a robbery gone wrong. They say a couple sitting near the bluffs was talking to a group of teens when the friendly exchange turned to demands.
Dressed in a mask and gloves, produced a handgun and demanded items from the two parties that have just met. At which point, our now victim would produce a handgun and fire.
Police say it's unclear how many times 16-year-old Levante Broadbent was hit. He died at the scene. Police say the man who shot him tried to help.
He held on to the area, rendered first aid, took off his shirt, tried to give immediate help, called the police as he's supposed to do.
Like that's not him at all.
Family members who did not want to be identified say the Levante they know loved sports and did everything he could to stay on the court, field, or wrestling mat since he was very little. Levante would have been a junior at Henry Sibley High School. Families say they have more questions than answers.
We want to know why he had to be shot so many times. We want to know, where did he get this gun?
I'm going to cut it off there because we're running out of time. But I think the better question, Mom, is where did your 16-year-old kid get a gun, and what was he doing out at 10 o'clock at night on a school night with a gun trying to rob people in a park?
Yeah,
why don't you answer
clearly
that?
did not get that gun legally.
No, clearly he couldn't get it legally, wasn't allowed to possess it. So that's, so mom always, so the moms of the dead kids always have questions for other people. Nobody ever asked the mom's question, like where did your kid get a gun and what was he doing out at 10 o'clock at night with a bunch of thugs trying to rob people? Anyway, we're running out of time. So you got anything you want to add, producer Susan?
No, and enjoy the snow on this first day of spring.
All right. If you want to find any of this stuff, the links, you want to see that link to just go to the website, JerzeeJoe.com. You spell it J-E-R as in Robert, Z as in zebra, E-E, JerzeeJoe.com. Questions, suggestions, Joe at JerzeeJoe.com, and producer Susan will have the show links up, and we'll probably play the rest of that TikTok with the teachers talking about how unteachable kids are next week. And with that, producer Susan, I will talk to you next week. All right? You take care. Bye-bye.
You too.